Greetings and welcome. How are we all feeling at this moment? Today's topic is about desensitizing. And when we desensitize, we make ourselves less vulnerable to experiences and things that might make us afraid. It builds our resilience, and it also helps us deal with the difficult aspects of life, the triggering aspects of life, and the difficulties. And overall, it just makes us a little bit less sensitive. And when we have phobias, and there is a plethora of phobias that people experience, and it has to do with bad experiences, it has to do with past trauma. Remember that phobias come from an intense fear that creates anxiety that we accept as true. And a really good way to work through your phobias is through desensitizing. And that helps expose you. What we call in the treatment of phobias is exposure therapy. So we'll expose you little bit by little bit to triggers that aren't as heavily stimulating, and then slowly you start to increase it and increase it. And that's how you get through the fear of certain things that's sort of like phobias. And the best way to work through phobias is through desensitizing, and that makes it a little bit less daunting, a little bit less fear impelling, fear compelling, and all of those things. Because working through phobias, you need to do exposure therapy, and you need to desensitize yourself to your triggers. And that brings me to my next point. If you are overly sensitive to triggers, you're going to get triggered a lot, and your trauma is going to get worse and worse and worse, and what you are running away from could also increase in fear and increase in anxiety. Because the more you avoid your triggers, the less able you are to face them and to deal with them. Because desensitizing yourself to your triggers is the best thing you can do when you are healing your trauma. Because triggers are little signs of trauma that come out, and the best way to start healing from your trauma is to desensitize yourself to your triggers, to not be as afraid and be as anxious when it comes to those triggering situations, because unfortunately we can't always avoid triggers. And the more you face your triggers, the more resilient you'll become. And desensitization is great for anxiety. It is the best thing for anxiety, because it takes those little fears and it takes it one bit at a time, exposing you little bit by little bit by little bit. And the more you expose yourself to your fear or to your phobia or to your trauma, the less triggered you are going to become by it. Desensitization, also known as exposure therapy, is the best way to deal with severe anxiety and social anxiety and generalized anxiety and panic disorders, because it helps you not get so triggered as easily. And it's about exposing yourself little bit by little bit in increments. You don't have to go bungee jumping tomorrow, but you're afraid of heights. No, you do it little bit by little bit by little bit. Go to a very tall building. Go up the stairs or up the elevator and stand on top of that building and just look down. And that is a good way to start desensitizing yourself. And remember, when you are looking at exposure therapy and desensitizing yourself, that little bit by little bit by little bit has to be consistent. Anything to do with desensitization has to include consistency, because you need to be consistent in the way that you are exposing your brain to fears. You need to be consistent in dealing with your triggers and dealing with your traumas, and you need to be consistent in working on it, because otherwise you could end up even worse off than you were in the first place if you don't put in consistency. And if you expose yourself to too much too soon, then you're going to make your phobia worse, you're going to make the trauma worse, you're going to make the situation worse. As I said, baby steps, you'll get there in the end. Just be consistent with it. And it's about consistent reinforcement. You need to reinforce yourself. You need to convince yourself why it is good for you to desensitize. Even if it's through affirmations or small rewards for facing certain stimuli that is very triggering for you. And it's very important that we do desensitize, because a lot of us get emotionally riled up very quickly, and we become very erratic, very emotional, very emotionally dysregulated, and we become very sensitive to things that can upset us, things that can worry us, things that can make us angry. And desensitizing yourself to these things helps you manage them better. It helps with your resilience, and it helps you to be able to deal with things as they present themselves. And if something does trigger you, you know how to deal with it in a calm way instead of reacting. So it's important to understand that it is meant to decrease your sensitivity to stimuli, as long as you practice consistent reinforcement. And desensitization causes more tolerance. It creates more tolerance. It makes you more able to deal with things. It creates a very high tolerance for very intense, high energy stimuli. It means that you are able to deal with it better, and you do not become emotional or emotionally dysregulated. It means that you are more tolerant to the emotions that you're feeling and the experiences that you are currently feeling and undergoing. And desensitization creates the ability to regulate emotions better and allow for more logical thinking. Because when you desensitize yourself from your emotions, you sort of disconnect, and you're able to not just manage the emotion, but you are able to manage the intensity of the emotion. And that's what matters most. And once you are able to deal with the intensity of the emotion, you are able to apply logical thinking so that you could solve the problem instead of running away from the problem and making the trauma or the phobia or the anxiety worse. And interestingly enough, desensitization is used to treat trauma and people with PTSD. It's to make them less vulnerable to their triggers and less emotionally dysregulated when they do have to face their triggers. So desensitization is known as exposure therapy, and it is used in an array of mental health conditions. As I stated earlier, anxiety and our trauma as well, because it helps us get a better grasp of what we're feeling, how to internalize that, and how to process that as well. And desensitization is how we get out of our comfort zones, because you have to force yourself to take those little baby steps, little bit by little bit. It's uncomfortable, but growth is uncomfortable. And desensitization is the best way to work through traumas, anxieties, it's an amazing thing that you can do for yourself, especially if you are struggling with the severe phobia. Desensitization takes us out of our comfort zones, allows for more logical thinking, and requires consistent reinforcement. So remember, you are unique and valuable. Take care of that stunning person. Stay strong wherever you're from. You are